Okay.
Right. Welcome back, councillors, and welcome back, Councillor Macaulay. During the break, some of us went away and did a little bit of wordsmithing and discussing. And what I'm going to do now is to move a pro forma resolution to deal with the sludging or the wastewater plant problems. Now, when I say pro forma, we have to have something to discuss. And if you don't like it, then you may amend it. But nevertheless, we need to get underway. So I will move from the chair that we approve $1 million of additional funding in the annual plan 23-24 rates to be spent on bullet point 1, bringing the Martinborough wastewater treatment plant back to compliance, including desludging, estimated at a total cost of 0.862 million. Second bullet point, desludging the Greytown wastewater treatment plant at an estimated total cost of 0.36 million. Do I have a second, please? Thank you. So the very aware people amongst our group will have noticed that on the one hand, I'm recommending $1 million be added to the rates, but the total lifetime cost of the two projects that we're mentioning actually comes to something like 1.2 or 1.3. However, it's not all going to happen in 1 year. And whilst the preparatory work, which I had Stephen's notes here a moment ago, of approximately 400K will in fact be done probably by halfway through the year. Once it actually starts getting to the desludging, well, just to quote him, possibly half of it will be done in this financial year, which would be 300K, and there would be another 300K coming up in the year after. However, as I've just been consulting CE, once you've done the planning, what happens thereafter is to some extent within our control. So we can actually sort of ask that the work be phased so that it pans out according to our budget. And then we come back in 12 months and we now probably know more, and we can make decisions at that time, probably to be going into the long-term plan. Because obviously we've got a long-term problem fixing up a number of wastewater plants that have not been maintained in the way they should. So we'll just take a little intermission. It's outside, not inside, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Right.
Apologies, Councillor Macaulay.
Yeah. Or wait for the storm.
Will it come again?
Yes, it will. Yes.
Okay.
3 times.
We always miss out.
Obviously, no one's.
There we go. Yeah.
It lures you into a false sense of security.
You're responsible for the claim. Both. All the time.
People can't sleep there. People even
They have a paging system, I'm sure. I'm sure they do both, but not sure why they need to do it. Don't use pages now. Don't they use pages? On phones. On phones.
Right.
Okay. Not a paging system, it's phones.
And it's coming once more.
Yep.
At least 1972.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
Might wait for a response.
Where do you see the hand raised?
It just pops up as a quick message. Do you want to?
It comes up as a text message.
So what we're going to do now, the piece has come back again. I'm going to invite the seconder to make any comments he wished to. And then I think Councillor Maynard is the first to have their hand up, but the rest of you may like to get thinking about at which point you enter the debate. Councillor Butler.
No, I don't think there's anything more I can add, actually. I think I've pretty much said what I would say.
Councillor Maynard.
Sorry about that. What you've put down has no mention of the better off funding with the $1 million.
That is correct.
Okay. Then I don't have a lot to say except that I'm against it because we've got the opportunity to use that $1 million both for Martinborough and for Greytown, and I think that we're absolutely remiss at looking a gift horse in the mouth. I cannot believe that. So that's what I'd like it to be amended to approve the $1 million additional funding with the amounts for Martinborough and for Greytown for using the better off funding.
Okay, so are you formally moving an amendment?
I'm quite happy to if that's what I need to do. That would be what I'd like to amend it to have on there.
Well, you don't need to do it, but if you wish the final recommendation or resolution to have the funding coming from the better off funding, then somebody needs to move an amendment to that effect.
Yes, then I do move that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We may well end up going backwards and forwards with somebody amending one and one and going back. Can we just deal with one thing first and see whether this flies and then come back? If it doesn't fly, look at the next one.
We could do
Well,
that.
now we've got two options, so we could just see which one is more palatable.
Okay, rightio then. So we'll put the amendment on hold, and what we'll assume is that if this resolution is lost, then we'll come back with a new resolution which picks up the point that we've just heard from Councillor Maynard. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in terms, you talked about a phased approach to this. How does that sit with our regulators? I guess there's two elements to my question. One is that obviously you're looking at a ratepayer-based funding sludge treatment of both Greytown and Martinborough. I'm just the phased approach. I'm not sure how that fits with our regulators, and does it give assurance to our regulators that we are acting in this in the quickest possible way? And maybe that's something that I could ask Stefan to answer.
Well, we'll put it through the CD.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I think it would probably be more accurate to invite Stefan to answer that question directly. He's been in conversations with the regulator. So.
Thank you, Chair. So the most important thing that in relation to Greater Wellington is that we present a compliance plan and then we resolve to fund it. And I think the suggestion at the moment is that we'd be able to fund all of the CapEx costs. That would be a lot of the upfront costs, because design is a CapEx cost. A lot of the upfront costs, there'd be no problem with that, and the regulator would be quite happy to see us progress with the design work, which is CapEx. And then, as I said earlier, the operational work would happen in the middle of the year to late year. And so if we had $1 million of OPEX, I mean, I'd have to really talk to Stantec in order to understand the curve properly, but I suspect strongly that that would be sufficient to get us through to the next year. The only pause I've got on that is that we do need to be able to, because we would start our desludging in this financial year, and it is a multi-year project, and we have to engage a contractor to do it. So we do have to be in the position of funding the full contract, even if it is a multi-year contract. So we wouldn't want to be in a position of only being able to desludge to a certain point contingent on funding that we would be getting in the LTP, because that would be that would put us in an impossible situation in relation to the contractor that we'd engaged. You know, we stop desludging now until we get a funding decision. So the only pause I've got, Chair, is that we make sure we've got a multi-year appropriation, as it were, guarantee the contract if it spreads into the next financial year.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steph.
Anything else, Paul?
No.
No,
no,
okay, thank you. Councillor Sadler-Foster.
I think I've made my position on this particular point fairly clear, but the other thing that I'd like to raise is in Wednesday's meeting, an argument against using the Better Off funding was around the equal opportunity for our entire district to benefit from the Better Off funding. And yet with this particular recommendation of rates funding the sludge removal of Martinborough and Greytown, our entire district will pay for that in their rates, Featherston included, with no apparent benefit to them or to their wastewater treatment station. So as I've said multiple times, I don't agree with rates funding the desludging. I don't agree with 1 year's worth of residents paying for work that has been put off for so long over such a large amount of time. And I don't agree that we should be rating all of our communities, Featherston in particular, the work that has been done specifically into other towns.
Thanks, Chair. On that point, Melissa, I think you'll see that Featherston has had millions of dollars already spent on its wastewater treatment plant just recently with no benefit to Greytown or Martinborough. So I think that's a moot point because I was once told all urban players in the whole district pay evenly and all rural players pay evenly. It doesn't matter what town you're from or what ward you're out of. So
But you guys, Greytown and Martinborough have already had the benefit from Featherston ratepayers with their 35-year consents and the work that's been done on there. So
yeah,
that's a moot point.
yeah, but it's the same. The money's been spent there.
But
So-
you can't use the argument, you can't use, the point is you can't use that argument for one fund, but say it's a moot point when the fund is somewhere else. That's the point.
Well, it's not a moot point because what my point is, you're saying only Martinborough and Greytown benefit from this. And I'm saying, well, only Featherston's benefited from their new plant, which will need desludging sooner or later as well. And then the other towns are going to have to pay for that.
Yes, but my point wasn't based on who pays for what. My point was that an argument was made on Wednesday in regards to the Better Off funding, that it shouldn't be used for this project.
That was my argument. My argument was urban over rural. It wasn't from town to town or ward to ward. It was simply an argument over urban and rural, where rural lose out for an urban cost when rural are already paying for their own sewer systems in their own backyards. That was my point.
If I can just seek clarification from the Chief Executive, the people who would end up paying this are those who are connected to the sewage system, I believe. It wouldn't be everybody in the whole district. Is that right or wrong?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right.
Sorry, can you clarify that? Who will be paying for this, Karen?
Everyone who has a water connection.
Everybody who has.
Everyone who has a water,
Everyone who has a water connection, the entire district,
No.
Wastewater connection.
Wastewater connection.
across the entire district.
Oh, well,
Everyone with a waste.
yes, that's correct. Yeah,
Treatment
that's correct.
across the district.
But
yes.
not everyone in the district.
No, but across the district, it's not specified to towns.
No, thank you. Okay, yes, thank you, Councillor Elams.
Thanks. Thanks, Mayor Martin. Likewise, I've commented before. I think the main point I'd like to make is that we haven't consulted with our community on adding another $1 million to the orange water function or orange water option. If we are going to do that or add another $1 million, we need to consult and get a mandate from our ratepayers who are going to be affected by that extra $555 per annum. I think the option that was discussed on earlier on Wednesday this week about utilising some of that 1 million of that 1.88 and then ring fencing the balance of 880,000 for other uses. I think that's a valid option. I think our communities would accept that. If we utilised that other 800,000 for other projects around the district. I know Councillor Plummer has spoken at length about using that 1.88 mil for intergenerational projects, which we have never ever previously had the opportunity to do around our district. However, I think our more pressing priority is to deal with the intergenerational issues around our wastewater plants, which here in Martinborough have gone back 50 years. Now, like I said before, we are suffering, Martinborough and Great Young could possibly suffer economically if we don't start that work immediately, and we've got a prime opportunity to do it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parsley.
It's Kate speak.
My views are just exactly as I did the last round, and they haven't changed with us. So it saves time, perhaps by just taking my views as what I said before.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kay just reiterated that your view has not changed.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Councillor Parsley.
We don't know if it's going to cost $1 million. It could cost a whole lot more than that. So the idea of just taking 800,000 out of the 1.8 and ring fencing that and going, we're just going to leave that there as part of better off funding and uses of $1 million. If this thing runs over $1 million, where are we going to find that cash from? Because that's unbudgeted as well at this stage. So we'll end up going into the 800,000. So we can't actually park it like that rather than committing the 1.8 to this, or not at all. I don't think it should be the 1.8. I think we should be looking at, unfortunately, the ratepayers may have to wear the burden of this for 12 months. And we use the better off funding for just that, for a community, for many community projects that are generational. That's where I remain on it.
Is there anybody who hasn't spoken? Thank you.
Sorry. Sorry, all I got to do was put in my that I'd like it changed, but I haven't actually spoken to anything as well. So I've had my hand up, but please let Rebecca go first.
Thanks, Pip. Okay, so I have just made a few notes. I think this council has had an historical practice of hiding the true costs of running water services out in this area. I think this is something that's been going on for decades. And I think that it's part and parcel of having a democratic process where people get elected for short periods of time on the promise of keeping rates low. And then there just ends up with a legacy of historic underinvestment. We are not the only council that has this. A lot of councils across the country are struggling with this. We get a lot of benefits for living in what, in my humble opinion, is the most beautiful place in the entire world. We get these incredible vistas. We've got this lovely environment that we get to enjoy, and the cost of that is that we have to fund it, and the way that we fund that is in appropriate setting of rates. We live in an area where there's not a lot of ratepayers, so the cost gets spread not as thinly as it does in places where there's more ratepayers. My belief is that the better off funding intentions for that have shifted with the water services entities changing, but ultimately it was supposed to be something with far horizons, something great and spectacular that we get to do one-off that has a good impact on the community for a long time. And my feeling is that that money wasn't meant to be given to the council to deal with our problems. That money was meant to be given to the community. And we are just the custodians of it for a brief time until we can put that where it needs to go. I'd also like to make note that in our current budget, current LTP, we don't have any funding or consideration for climate-related projects that would impact future generations. And I know we haven't discussed what our preference would be for funding for the 1.8 million of Better Off funding, but I would suggest that would be an excellent use of it, being that the next generation is going to be impacted by coming events from climate change. And I think that that would be a very hard sell to put on ratepayers at that point. In regards to what Councillor Elam's said about needing further consultation from the community, I don't believe that we do, because we have already consulted with them around what we want to do with the budgets. We've given them options, and it seemed quite clear that the preference was for sitting at somewhere between orange and green anyway. And like I said earlier, my preference would be for a green budget, so to come down to an orange plus is, you know, a savings from where I wanted to be anyway. I think a really good thing is to do a bit of a retrospective exercise and think about, you know, when we get 10 years down the track and we're looking back at decisions that we've made, are we going to feel proud that we took that money and used it to clean poo ponds? Or are we going to be able to look at a project that we have put in place that has benefits for the community? And the other point that I'll put down is that we talk about our extraordinary economic climate that we're living in at the moment, with cost of living pressures left, right and centre, and uncertainty. My throwback to that is that we have previously lived through times of pretty good prosperity, and we didn't rate appropriately at that point. So if we're not going to do it when times are good, when are we going to do it?
Thank you. I will go to Councillor Maynard.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thanks, Bex, because I think you raised some really, really good points as well. I just think that the reality is that this funding has come along at a time when something has raised its head. And yes, it goes back decades. Do we continue to leave it? Because the reality is as well is that it's still going to take time to even build up that money. Even if we put it onto the ratepayers now, it's still going to take a year before we actually have any money to be able to get started. And that's a real concern to me, because we're talking about the fact that there's an abatement notice already, which means that it can go further and council can end up getting more what's it called that they put on you, so that way we end up having to pay more money because I can't think, you know, like legal whatever
Execution.
if we're not meeting, you know, if we're not doing anything towards it, and if we're hampered by waiting until and not being able to even get started on the points that Stefan had already raised, that's another big concern, because that's further further money going away and being another burden put onto the ratepayers. Now, I just don't believe that our ratepayers sit in a place where they can take this on. However, like I said earlier, if what we did was we utilised part of this money now for the to get started with the Martinborough and the Greytown dislodging, look at with the water urban rate, just putting an extra 10 cents or whatever on per week, or that goes into starting up a reserve the same way that we do with the rural roading. So getting started with putting something in place, so that way we have some money that's slowly building up from our the people who are attached to the water, which does include people who are rated as rural, but who are actually on that on that water system as well. Then that way we're at least making a start. And I think that it's really, really important at this time that we get going and get moving with this. And that's why I believe that we need to be using this funding, because it's all good when you don't know what you don't know, but now that we know it, we need to start doing something about it. And that is my absolute belief.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. If there's nobody else who's got a subsequent point, I will exercise my right of reply. I'll just come back to Councillor Plimmer, who didn't use his seconding opportunity when he had it.
Yeah, thanks. Can I just clarify that when a rate is struck, that is deemed to have been collected for the purposes of moving forward? Thank you, Pip. So you're very wrong there, Pip. Sorry. So that argument that we won't have the money, if we strike the rate, it's counted as money in the bank. Yep.
As I said before, over 4 instalments, so we don't collect it all at the start.
That's right. Sorry, Alistair. No, thank you. Thank you for your apology, Alistair.
Yeah.
And so by instalment 4, you will have collected that amount, and it sounds like that's most of the work will be completed.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I have nothing further to add from what Rebecca said. I completely agree with everything you've said, and Woody and Martin. There's nothing else I can add. I think you just summed it up brilliantly. Thank you.
Okay, so in my right of reply, I'll just make a comment and remind people that the early part of the work is likely to be CapEx anyway, and therefore that will be funded in a completely different way. We collect the first rates instalment, I think roughly July, August.
If I could just add, it will be CapEx and OpEx. It will
be both.
It'll be both. And under normal circumstances, the first instalment will go out in July.
July, that's what I thought. Do you have any idea what the split between CapEx and OpEx is?
It's about even, isn't it? Yeah, 50-50.
Right. So in that case, the first instalment would in fact cover the OpEx that's required in that quarter. Thank you very much. The other thing I'll comment on is, yes, these are not easy decisions at all. And I wonder if we go back, this is just to pick up the point that was made about how good has our long-term planning been. If we go back and look in the long-term plan, how much do we set aside for maintaining the wastewater plants? How much do we set aside for desludging them? And yet these are predictable costs. And I suspect had we thought about them at the time, we wouldn't be having the discussion now. We would have made appropriate provision at that time. And now, in my view, we have to do the catch-up. We've had a couple of lucky years where we pretended that this was not a cost that people who use the wastewater plants would have to pay for. But I'm not quite clear why anybody else other than those who use the wastewater plant should be asked to make a contribution to it. Now, I thought Councillor Sadler-Footer raised an interesting point of view, and one that I'm not entirely opposed to, which is, if it's a Martinborough problem, let Martinborough pay for it. If it's a Greytown problem, ditto. And if it's a Featherston problem, let them pay for their new wastewater plant. However, that would be a very big departure from the way that we have operated hitherto. And I don't think that this particular motion or time is the place to debate it. And I think if we did debate it, it wouldn't survive very long anyway. I think we accept, as people said yesterday, that we are a region, we are a district, and to a certain extent, we all share the positives of that, and sometimes we have to share the costs. Just one last point. I came away from a Maori Standing Committee meeting earlier this month, and I know that some of us think that the issue of the better off funding isn't something that's well known or well discussed. I can assure you that the Maori Standing Committee are very well aware of it. They are very excited by it. They see a huge amount of potential that can come out of that. And so my preference is that, well, as the motion is placed, that we accept that some of us have imposed a cost on the district, and we should be willing now to pay for it to get fixed up. So I'm going to ask Amy to read the motion again, and then I'm going to put it, I'm going to ask for a show of hands so that we don't make a miscount. Amy.
So resolve to approve $1 million of additional funding in the annual plan financial year 23-24 rates to be spent on bringing the Martinborough wastewater treatment plant back to compliance, including desludging at an estimated total cost of $0.862 million, and B, desludging of the Greytown wastewater treatment plant at an estimated cost of $0.360 million.
Now, did everyone hear that? Okay, thank you. So I'll put the motion. All in favour, please show their hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Those against, please say no.
No. No.
Right, so
Macaulay,
well, I'm going to assume councillor Macaulay,
Is no.
well, I'm not unless she says so.
Hey, are you there? She's talking, okay.
Councillor Macaulay, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. Yes, I did say no.
The motion is tied 5-5. Now, I could exercise a casting vote, but I'm not going to do that because there are other resolutions that we could put in its place, which may well get a majority point of view. But what I would suggest is that we just take a 5-minute adjournment, and I mean 5 minutes, and we think about, is there a middle ground here that everybody can maybe not be totally happy with, but can at least say, here we've made some sort of compromise. But I think at the moment we've got two either ors, but actually that's not always the way it has to be. So 5 minutes starting now.
Can I just clarify something, please?
That's fine.
If there's 10 of us voting and there's 5 for and 5 against, now I'm not sure how it works, Your Worship, but normally the mayor would then have the deciding vote. So your vote would come in last. However, your vote has made it so it's split. Am I correct in saying that?
There are 5 all. I have a casting vote, which I decline to use because I'm going to ask the meeting to try and reach a consensus. And we're now in an adjournment to allow some of that to happen.
We just.
Councillor Macaulay, did you hear all that?